All right. So, body composition refers to the components that make up the body. Usually, we're interested in the percent of the body that's adipose or fatty versus the percentage that is fat free. The primary reason for this is that obesity or extreme overfatness is closely related to a number of health risks prevalent in Western society. So, cardiovascular disease, peripheral vascular disease, hypertension, and diabetes. There's also less critical reasons for interest. For example, athletes wishing to maximize their performance may want to optimize their amount of muscle and fat. And many individuals are interested in body comp due to society's perception that extreme leanness is aesthetically desirable. Thus, it's important to know not only body weight, but how much of the weight is fat and how much is lean. Changes resulting from exercise may not be noticeable by a scale weight, but many techniques are available for estimating body composition. Then, for individuals who have an especially high or low percent body fat, we can calculate how many pounds an individual should gain or lose to achieve a more optimal percent body fat. Thus, the purpose of this lab is to expose you to different methods of measuring body composition and techniques for evaluating disease risk based on body composition. So the so the Metropolitan Life Insurance Scale is among the largest global providers of insurance, annuities, and employee benefit programs. The way this company determines whether you were eligible for insurance was with a basic height and weight scale. This BMI system determines overweightness. Essentially, the amount you pay depends on how overweight you are, according to this table. If your height and weight are out of the limits for normal, you'll either pay more or you'll be denied health insurance altogether. This became a big deal when the media picked up on NFL players being denied life insurance due to their overweight status. So, what's wrong with this what's wrong with this system from a basic physiology standpoint? Um, Obviously, the basic height and weight does not take into account the composition of the weight and fat or muscle percentage. So the system that MetLife uses is known as basic or simple anthropometrics, a measurement of a person's body size, weight, and proportion. And this is where BMI originated. BMI specifically is the ratio of body weight to body height, and then grouped by age. Um, this is meant to be a population measure to estimate disease risk, um, and it gives no way of determining if a person is heavily muscled or just simply over fat. Um, your your health is not only affected by how much body fat you have, but also by where most of the fat is located on the body. So people who tend to gain weight mostly in their hips and buttocks have a roughly pear shape, and people who tend to gain weight mostly in the abdomen have more of a less healthy apple body shape. Um, so clearly, there's a need to distinguish between overweightness and overfatness. So, what are the five most common methods of body composition measurement? Hydrostatic weighing, underwater weighing. This uses um, this uses a person's weight in water to determine their density, and then because fat and muscle mass have specific densities, we can use that to calculate percent body fat. Air placement plasmography, meaning that instead of calculating the displacement of water, we're calculating the displacement of air in a given chamber. You sit in this chamber, there's a calculation for how much pressure is built up, and that enables you to again calculate density and calculate percent body fat. And there's DEXA, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. This is basically an X-ray machine that will differentiate your body not into just lean body mass and fat mass, but it will take apart lean body mass into bone mass and then the rest of lean body mass. This is what's known as a three-compartment model because it's separating components of lean body mass. Whereas underwater weighing, bod pod, these are just two-compartment models where we're just looking at the differences between fat mass and fat-free mass all together. Then the two that we will be focused on today are bioelectrical impedance analysis, small portable instrument with an electrical current applied through the body. This is based upon total body water. Water conducts electricity a lot better or a lot quicker than fat. So through estimation, through calculations of that theory, we can get percent body fat based upon total body water. And then skin fold thickness is where we can measure different anatomical landmarks in terms of the thickness of the skin fold and determine or estimate how much body fat because of a few assumptions that we'll talk about. So when we're measuring height and weight, we use a stadiometer. So just very quickly go over not the precautions, but the methods of using a stadiometer. It has to be calibrated. So when we're not on the stadiometer, it should be level at 0. If not, then we would need to calibrate it by taking a flathead screwdriver and turning the knob on the side until it calibrates to 0. When measuring someone, they need to be barefoot in minimal clothing. As many body parts against the back of the stadiometer as possible. Shoulders back, head lifted. Inhale fully, hold, and then take the measurement. Right? For research purposes, this has to be very standardized because if someone comes in with rounded shoulders and head slightly tilted down, or they don't get that extra 2 centimeters from breathing in, that might affect where they land in the BMI scale, thus affecting the interpretation of their disease risk. When we're measuring height, make sure we're measuring height at eye level. So we have little people who are measuring really tall people. Make sure you're standing on something so you can read it at eye level, or you will either overestimate or underestimate. And then we want to prevent awkward situations at all times possible. So making sure that you do not load a person who's 300 pounds on a scale that only can measure accurately up to 250 pounds. It only creates an awkward situation for all parties involved. Right? So specifically with BMI, we will divide our weight in kilograms versus divided by our height in meters squared. So we might as well just do this right now. Go ahead and calculate your weight. So I would be 150 divided by 2.2. All right, and that number, which is for me about 68.2 kilograms, would be divided by. I'd take my height in inches, so 72 inches, multiply it by 2.54. That would give you centimeters, and you'd have to move the decimal place 2 places to get meters. So mine would be 183 centimeters, or 1.83 meters. Square that, and so I'll divide 68.2 divided by 3.349, giving me a BMI of 20.4, and we can see that in the next slide. 20.4 fits right in the middle of a healthy BMI. Does that 100% mean that I'm at a healthy weight? I'm at a healthy weight and height, but we still don't know what that's composed of. Most likely, there's trends and correlations that say if you're at a healthy weight, more than likely you're at a healthy percent body fat, but that's not always the case. We know people who are skinny fat. A lot of people are very skinny, but they're just made up of fat and no muscle, right? Which can be more unhealthy than being overweight in certain situations. All right. So then we have again waist to hip ratio. As your waist to hip ratio increases, the risk increases twofold for for diseases such as obesity, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease, heart attack, stroke, hypertension, diabetes, mellitus, gallbladder disease, and even death. Right? So again, here's our BMI chart, and this would be the first step that a clinician takes when estimating disease risk. While the value doesn't give us over fatness, which exercise physiologists are just enamored with, it's a very quick and valid method to group individuals into a category of potential risk. More precise methods should be used for determining body composition, secondary to BMI, if risk on the BMI scale is shown to be elevated, so outside of the healthy ranges. If an individual requests percent body fat calculations because of sheer interest, because they're wanting to track it, or they're wanting to compare their potential performance against other athletes. All right, so to measure the circumference of the waist, you'll wrap the tape measure around the subject from the anterior side. You'll place the tape measure at the narrowest part of the waist between the umbilicus and the last rib. So for me, it would be just right above the belly button. Some people will use the belly button as a marker. As long as you're consistent, that's okay. But for these norms, you want to measure at the narrowest part. Okay. You want to confirm that the tape is parallel all the way to the ground. Have the subject relax the abdominal muscles so we're not contracting anything. And if you have a spring-loaded tape, pull the tape to the calibrated tension and measure in whatever units you want. Usually people use centimeters, but it's okay. It's a ratio. To the nearest millimeter at the end of a normal expiration. So, and you measure. Okay. To measure the circumference of the hip, you wrap the tape around from the side of the subject. Place the tape at the largest circumference of the butt. So resolve any twists, cross the tape and switch hands to avoid having your arms cross each other, and confirm that the tape is parallel to the ground all the way to the subject. If you have a spring-loaded tape, pull the tape to the calibrated tension, record the measurement in centimeters to the nearest millimeter. You will want to do this twice, and then calculate the average waist-to-hip ratio. Without looking at the table, ratios for men above 0.9 and ratios for women above 0.8 sharply increase your risk for having hypertension, high cholesterol, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. And then depending on the reference sources that you're using, these body fat norms may differ slightly, but it's standard that male percent body fats will usually be about 3% lower, right? High body fat percentage presents a higher risk for cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and type 2 diabetes. Of course, some fat in our bodies is necessary, such as for cellular membranes, vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins, hormones, and for the surrounding of our nerves. Then we have storage fat, which in adipose, which is available for fat as fuel. This is often termed non-essential fat, while the fat that we need to have on our bodies is essential fat. The non-essential fat is the fat that people are interested in reducing for reasons of health, athletic performance, or vanity. Now, essential fat is thought to make up about 3% of the body weight in men and about 12% in women, depending on your age and gender, and this will place you into various categories. Again, you don't want to be lower than these, because then you do not have the essential fats that you need for normal physiological processes. And then for individuals, this is just a side note, for individuals over 65 years old, the values are slightly different. The healthy body fat percentages are slightly higher in these individuals, simply because if health complications arise in an older adult, such as a hip fracture, your chances of a full recovery will be higher if the individual has a slightly higher than normal body fat. Right? So interesting stuff. So we won't talk about, we'll save hydrostatic weighing and bod pod for next time, but I'll just very quickly tell you, hydrostatic weighing is when it's based on Archimedes' principle, saying that the amount of water displacement is proportional to the person's volume. You can calculate a density and get a percent body fat from that. All right, that's what we'll do next week. There are pros and cons to that. bod pod. The exact same thing, except you're just displacing air. So you sit in an egg-shaped, I guess, device, and it calibrates how much air is in it, or the pressure within the bod pod when you're in it, and the amount of air you get in it. Shut the door. You calculate it again. It measures air displacement. It gives you a density, and then it also gives you percent body fat. Oh, again, pros and cons we'll talk about next week. DEXA we'll just save for next week as well, because the majority of the lecture is happening this week. All right. And then bioelectrical impedance, the first and easiest one that we're doing today for percent body fat. So the BIA is based on the principle that lean tissue conducts current better than fat does. A low-level electrical current is sent through the body based upon where the electrodes are that you're holding or standing on, and then the resistance to that flow will estimate how much total body water you have, and through different equations based upon previous research in proportions, the BMA will estimate the amount of percent body fat. The procedures, it tells you exactly what to do. It'll ask you if you're normal or an athlete, your age, your height, your gender, and then I think your physical activity level. Maybe you'll hold on to it. It'll send the current from left arm to right arm, or vice versa, and you will get a percent body fat from that. We have a couple assumptions based upon the fact that the current is going to flow through the path of least resistance. So if we're holding a BIA, it's not going to go from the arm down to the left leg and down to the right leg and back up to the arm. It's going to go from this side over across your chest and over here, because that is the path of the least resistance. So depending on the body composition analyzer, or the analyzer you're using, it has to estimate a value for the rest of your body based upon where it's holding on to. There are some BI analyzers that you stand, so instead of getting across, it gets from the right leg to the left leg, so getting mostly your lower body. And then there are devices where you lay down with electrodes on both wrists, both feet, and it gives you a more full body scanner. All right, so that would ultimately be the one you would want to use if you had time and money and whatnot. So it's easy, it's quick, and there's absolutely no technician and error involved. Cons, there are a few pre-test guidelines that you need to follow. So you need to be well hydrated, because this is a test of total body water. If you're super hydrated, then it's going to overestimate your body fat. Okay. No exercise a few hours before, because the exercise will take water from your muscles and throw it into the interstitial fluid. Right, so it won't be counted. No eating, because that affects water balance, and there's a couple, but those are fine. And then the cons is it's preset calculations. So whereas with all of the other methods of body fat analysis, we have different equations for African Americans, Caucasians, Latin Americans, Asians, different populations, because fat sits differently on everybody. The BIA uses a preset calculation inside the machine, so we can't control for that. I would say increasing its or decreasing its accuracy potentially. Right? And then skin folding, what we will do the majority of the time today. The rationale for using skin fold thickness is that a proportion, about 50% of our body fat, is deposited subcutaneously. Thus, by measuring the amount of adipose tissue that can be pinched in certain anatomical sites, it's possible to gain some indication of the amount of overall body fat. So the process of turning skin fold thickness at various sites into a number representing body density is based upon research results. This type of research compares the sum of the skin folds, so you'll take the 3 skin fold sites, you'll sum them, put them into an equation, and it will give you body density. Again, from various equations depending on if your gender, your age, your ethnicity, and whatnot. All right. And this type of research compares the sum of the skin folds to the gold to most commonly known as the gold standard, which is underwater weighing. Um, so the relationship between subcutaneous fat and total body fat varies with race, age, and sex. Consequently, most equations that have been developed to predict body fatness are population specific and shouldn't be used for subjects of a different race, age, and sex. In general, estimation of percent body fat from skin fold measures has an error of about 3.5%, depending on your accuracy level. The better you are at skin folding, the more accurate your measures will obviously be. Different equations require different skin fold sites to be tested. So it's important to measure. It's important to understand the equation you're using, so you'll know which skin fold sites to use. And it may seem intuitive that if there are 7 body fat sites, then you would get a more accurate result if you measured all 7 of them and threw them into an equation. But that's not the case. The research has shown that if you can measure 3 body sites, and it gives you a very accurate prediction of overall body fat, right? And the most commonly used equations are the Jackson and Pollock equations for men and Jackson, Pollock, and Ward equations for women. These equations can be used across various age groups and have been validated in both athletic and non-athletic populations. Once body density has been determined using these equations, body comp's estimated using the Siri equation, and which is the equation used to estimate percent body fat in adult Caucasians. Percent body fat equals 4.95 divided by density minus 450. Okay. Assumptions, we're assuming that 50% is subcutaneous and 50% is visceral. It's just because it's, for most people, that's what it is. We assume that the compressibility of fat is standard across the body. We know that that's slightly not the case because eyelid skin and forearm skin are of different thicknesses. And compressibility, or skin thickness, would be standard across the body. All right. Pros, it's inexpensive, it's fast. Oh, okay. Let's go back up here. I need to change that. That's a duplicate. Relatively inexpensive. Good estimate if trained. And the type of caliper you use is important. Good calipers are going to cost you about $300, but there are many calipers that you can get for $10, $15 that do not do a very good job. But again, it depends on how precise you need to be and what type of money you have. Very difficult to use in obese. I would recommend never using skin fold in obese populations. It just you don't know what you're grabbing onto. All right. It's inaccurate for the elderly, just due to different issues relating to sarcopenia, so the loss of age-related muscle mass loss. Tester inexperience is the biggest error, and it's potentially uncomfortable, especially with someone who doesn't know how to do it correctly. All right. And then all of this becomes more important for the clinical or practical application, for when you can predict or determine what weight you should be at in order to reduce your percent body fat to a healthy range. So if we have a 200-pound individual who has a 30% body fat, we're wanting to get him down out of the obese category, optimally out of the overweight category. So if we wanted to ultimately get his body fat down to 20%, you take the current weight and multiply it by his lean mass. So, and you take his current weight and get his percent fat in pounds. So 200 times 0.30, because he's 30% body fat, so that's 60 pounds of fat. You subtract that from the weight to give you how much is fat-free mass. All right, so 140 pounds of his 200 are fat-free mass. Then you divide that by percent lean body mass, that desired percent lean body mass. So it would be 140 divided by 0.80, and that gives you what your weight should be if you want a percent body fat of near 0.20. This is assuming that a person's capable of reducing percent body fat without changing their muscle mass. Whether or not this is true will depend on an individual's exercise program and nutrition program. All right. And then the last thing we'll talk about is that several modes exist for describing differences in the composition of our bodies. The two compartment model, which would be underwater weighing, skin fold, bod pod, splits the body into two parts: fat mass and fat free mass. Fat mass is self-evident; it's adipose tissue, whereas fat free mass is made up of protein, bone, mineral, water, etc. So other multi-component models, like a three-compartment model, would separate fat-free mass into more than just that entity. So DEXA will give you fat mass, lean body mass, and also bone mass. So it gives you a more accurate representation of how much is actually muscle instead of lumping bone in with fat-free mass. All right. And then total body water can be combined, and BIA can be combined with any one of these in order to create a more multi-component model, which is considered more accurate because they remove more of the assumptions that are made in the two-compartment model. All right. Yeah, that's it.